Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word, and I'm Roberta Foster. And today I welcome Dr. Jim Grassi to Author's Corner. He's written the book The Watchman, a Clarion Call for men to stand in the gap. And he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Dr. Jim is the founder and president of Men's Ministry Catalyst and Let's Go Fishing Productions Foundation. As an award-winning author, former business leader, public administrator, college professor, and outdoor sport personality, he's been on the front lines of ministry to men since 1981. He was given the Ministry of the Year Award by the National Coalition of Ministries to Men and garnered the Faith and Freedom Award from the Religious Heritage of America Foundation and has authored 21 books. Dr. Jim, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a privilege to be with you and your listeners today.
So the title of the book is The Watchman, of course, with a subtitle. So let's start at the foundation. And what is the biblical meaning, rather, of watchman?
Well, that's a great question to start off with. And we find that coming from the book of Ezekiel, when I first see it, although in Genesis there's some reference to being a watchman. And basically we start with the principle, the basic understanding that men should be the watchmen for their families, for their churches, for their communities, that's our among our responsibilities as a godly man to protect and provide for our loved ones and to be on guard. And so we find back in the 6th century, Ezekiel being captured by the Babylonians, and all of a sudden God speaks to Ezekiel as he did Nehemiah and Jeremiah, and he said to Ezekiel in Ezekiel 2:1, he said, "Son of man, stand on your feet that I may speak with you." You know, a lot of men today, we're not standing on our feet. We're sitting on our sofas with our Game Boys and our remote controls, and we're not standing up for our families and for our faith. And God's Spirit entered Ezekiel, and when, to paraphrase, he said, basically, "Son of man, I'm sending you to Israel, back to Israel, to a rebellious people, because the people were in rebellion, kind of like what we are today." And then in chapter 3, he officially announces, he says, "I've appointed you a watchman, so to the house of Israel." And so when we think of a watchman back in biblical times, a watchman was a priest and a prophet. And where were the priests and prophets and the watchmen? They were on the wall, walking the wall, looking out over the prairie, over the desert. If they could see a army coming or something, they would blow their shofar, their horn, and alert people. In other words, they were to warn people. They were the outlook. They looked to what could happen in the future. And the second role they had was standing at the gates, and as people entered and left, they would welcome them, but also warn them that if they were leaving, hey, there are bad guys out there, be careful, take this route. And so they had this role of a watchman, and unfortunately, too many men today in their homes, and for sure too many pastors, have backed away from that role of being the watchman for their flocks.
Yeah. And that was what I was thinking about as you were explaining the definition of the word watchman, was that some might say that that's the pastors of the churches, but you're saying that's also the men of the household.
That's right. We're supposed to be the watchmen for our household, but when 50% of the nation's families tonight will go to bed without a biological father in the home, we have a problem, don't we, Roberta?
Well, we sure do. And how do we help families that are in that situation to actually have this watchman in their home?
That's a good question, because I think one of the responsibilities the church has, that I have as a godly man in our neighborhood, is to be a watchman for those single-parent mom families that are out there, and to provide, hopefully, some encouragement, oftentimes some resources, but to help model to the kids the love of Christ, and to move in a direction as a nation back towards building strong families that stay together. It's been said, as goes the man of the house, as goes the family, as goes the family, as goes the nation. And we can see the result in our country today of the lack of leadership, the lack of men stepping up in the role that God has ordained for them, and consequently we're seeing too many homes and kids being destroyed because of the lack of spiritual leadership.
Amen. Well, we have more to talk about with Jim Grassi regarding his book, The Watchman, a Clarion Call for Men to Stand in the Gap. And you are listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. Well, you gave me a word in your last comment that leads right into my next question. And on page 2 of your book, you say, there is a great leadership void in our country and in the world right now, as there was in Ezekiel's day. Such a void is ripe for the rise of the Antichrist, but we do not know when he will appear. Share with us a little bit more about that thought.
Well, we know that according to Scripture, in the last days, during the tribulation, the Antichrist will come about, but being a pre-tribber myself, and I think there's evidence in the Bible for that, strong evidence. I think that what we're looking at is the scenario that's going on within this country that tells us that Christ's return is imminent, that the kind of calamities, the kind of obstinance, the kind of rebellious spirit that people are manifesting now are really signs that end time is close at hand, and that we have a responsibility, each of us that know Jesus, to share the love of God and the grace of God with others, and to encourage them to look at a kingdom agenda.
Amen. Well, let's go back to the title of your book. It includes the subtitle, A Clarion Call for Men to Stand in the Gap. What is meant by standing in the gap?
That's another great question, Roberta. I can see that you've earned the right to have your job. Good question. So that, again, is a biblical thought. In Nehemiah as well as in Ezekiel, we see the Israelites rebuilding the wall, but they had a problem. The minute they started working on the wall, they'd be attacked by who knows who, the barbarians or others, and so they had to be vigilant. So you see in Nehemiah that the call was every man is to stand in front of their own house and rebuild their section of the wall that's down. And the encouragement is to have a sword in one hand and a trowel or brick in the other hand. The idea being that have your sword strapped to your side because you are to be a defender while you are also working. And so I think the great parallel for us has been today, the Clarion Call, is each of us need to start with our own home and to start there and work with our family, and then to move out from there to rebuild the wall of confidence, of faith, of integrity, of great character. These kinds of things are the things that we need to do as men as we look at our own portion of the wall that's our responsibility to build.
Well, one of the things I like about your book is in the division of your chapters, you have standing in the gap for a variety of different things. So we have standing in the gap for biblical manhood, for your family, in the marketplace, before the Lord, and with God's Word, as well as through prayer and with other men. So you've got it broken down into some very practical portions of teaching through your book on various ways of standing in the gap.
Exactly. And I want to encourage the people in your audience right now. They're looking at an overwhelming situation with what's going on in the college campuses today, with police officers being attacked and killed, with the nation and the uproar it's in, with the international scene. It seems almost overwhelming. And I would like to encourage your audience with what historian Edward Everett Hell said, that I am only one, but I'm still one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something.
Yes.
And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. And each of us can do something. And it starts in our homes, and it goes into our churches. And if your pastor is not proclaiming the Word of God accurately, if he's leaning towards a woke agenda, if he's trying to tickle the ears of people rather than be biblically accurate, you need to sit down and have a talk with them, because unfortunately about 50% of our churches in America today are what I'd call woke-friendly churches. And that just isn't biblical, and it doesn't set the right framework for our young people, for the next generation, to launch into the world and tackle the issues that are before them.
Very true. If we don't have leadership from the pulpit and working its way down into the family, that's why we're in the hurt that we are today, isn't it?
It is.
So, well, today I've been talking with Jim Grassi about his book, The Watchman, A Clarion Call for Men to Stand in the Gap. So, Jim, how can people find out more about this book and others that you've written?
Well, I'm pleased to announce that many of our books are on Kindle, on Audible, and through Amazon. And so they can go directly to those sources to download the books or order the books. They also can go through our ministry, and that's www.mensministrycatalyst.org, no apostrophe on mensministrycatalyst.org. And we have a tremendous amount of tools. In fact, I just this morning, before you called, read a comment by one of our followers that you guys have more resources to help people than anybody else in the world, for that matter, on men. And so if you're struggling with some issues, loneliness, anger, fear, we have all kinds of resources to help men and help families as well.
Fabulous. And that's always a great thing to have a resource for men to go to and help them become the man that God wants them to be. So today I've been talking with Jim Grassi. The book is The Watchman, A Clarion Call for Men to Stand in the Gap. And Jim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Been my privilege.
And if you missed any part of today's interview or would just like to hear it again and be encouraged again, you can find it on your favorite podcast platform or through KNEO.org. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.
The world is in chaos, and you're here for a purpose. What does the Bible have to say about it all? I'm Mark Taylor, host of Crosspoint podcast and radio show, and I'd like to invite you to join me each week as I navigate the complexities of faith, culture, and personal growth. Each week, I interview a different guest who is making an impact on the culture for God's kingdom. Whether you're seeking spiritual guidance, true information, or a fresh perspective, this podcast equips you to discern truth in today's chaotic world. When Christianity intersects with everyday life, that's where you'll find Crosspoint, sometimes discussing the issues that some churches don't want to talk about. Look up Crosspoint with Mark Taylor wherever you get your podcast, produced by KNEO Radio and the Sky High Podcast Network.